Now, it's time to say a very, very good morning to Richard Taylor, our good friend in the west of Wales, where we occasionally visit, but we haven't been for quite some time. Richard, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mike. Great to have you back from the USA as well.
Well, exactly right. How is Welsh Wales this morning? Is the sun shining? Has Drakeford stopped you going outside? What's going on?
Well, Drakeford's on his way to Brussels, isn't he, to negotiate with other European leaders to
try and get Putin he going to surrender?
To do a U-turn. Well, yeah, I mean, he posted a photo on social media yesterday. He's going up to show solidarity. I mean, it's not even a devolved matter. It's got nothing to do with him. It's the UK government. Another example of a waste of Welsh taxpayers' money, Mike.
Yes.
As you'd expect. Just virtue signalling once again from the Welsh government.
These people are amazing, aren't they? I mean, what makes him think anybody's interested in him in Brussels? I mean, Nicola Sturgeon used to try this time and time again, didn't she, to try and make out that, we want to stay in the European Union. It's nothing to do with us, what the UK wants to do.
Well, I think that's what it is, Nick, because we've seen it here since Brexit. They've never accepted the result of the vote here. They continually in the Senate gone banging on about the bad side of Brexit, trade, and all the stuff that they can put up to tell people it was the wrong thing to do. Yet the people of Wales voted to leave, and they can't get over that. And it's like it's like a man with a sore tummy. He's just trying to get rid of it. He can't get rid of it, and he's always going to keep virtue signaling over Brexit and moan about it. At every possibility he gets, he moans about Brexit.
Yeah, it is absolutely and utterly unbelievable. Speaking of Brexit, speaking of COVID, just before we get on to matters east in the Ukraine...
Is COVID still a thing then, Mike, is it?
I don't think it is. And in fact, not only is it no longer still a thing, the people who told us how to behave and why we had to hide away for every single minute of every single day of every single year in case we gave it to our grannies have admitted they got it so wrong that they should never really be allowed anywhere near government again.
Oh, well, there's a report out today, Mike, in the Exposure. I read it earlier this morning that 9 out of 10 people that died in England with COVID actually had the vaccine. I don't know, what if the source of that is correct, but I posted on Twitter. People can check it out. But it's been published by the UK government, so I'm assuming it's right, Mike.
Yeah.
And we've covered up a lot of this stuff, and there's investigations still to go on with Pfizer. There's a big report come out from them. There's a lot of information coming out that seems to be forgotten. But I, for one, and I'm sure many of your viewers and listeners as well, Mike, would be of the opinion we will not let this go. It's not going to be a diversion tactic. Yes, we're in the middle. We've seen what's happening. Putin's doing over there in Ukraine, and it's awful to see innocent lives being killed on both sides, and including the Russian soldiers, who for some of them don't even know why they're there. So those arguments will continue, but certainly we cannot let the government off the hook on things that have happened here in the UK and closer to home on domestic political issues.
No, I mean, I've said this just now to Julia that I will not let this go. It's all very well for them to say, oh, we got it wrong, we made a mistake. What I want to see is these people being hounded out of government, being hounded out of Downing Street, and being told never show your faces here again for fear of absolute ridicule and for fear of being fired and never being able to work again, because quite frankly what they did was nothing short of criminal, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think, well, the media were complicit, Mike. I think Tonya mentioned on your show yesterday, she talked about the last 2 years we've been lied to by mainstream media. So as a result of that, I posted something earlier this week and said it's awful what Putin's doing, going in and killing innocent lives. People started attacking me, saying, Rich, it's fake news. There's no war going on in Ukraine. I'm like, what? Are you serious? Because they didn't trust mainstream media. I get that. But there are other media sources out there, Mike. There's TalkRadio, there's other platforms as well. Many other places where we do get the truth, common sense, and there's different opinions that are allowed as well, where we're not censored and cancelled like many of the mainstream media outlets so surely are. And I think surely there will come a point where these politicians must be held to account for what they've done to our children, our education, our mental health, to our economy. Because let's remind ourselves, Mike, we're talking about the main, obviously the big news is the war in Ukraine at the moment. The real issue is this. Look at the state of our country, our military force. We don't have a military here in the UK. So even if, and people are calling for this and escalating it, and God forbid that ever happens, we don't need a nuclear war. It's the last thing we need, right? But the rhetoric doesn't help that, surely, I know. But here's the thing. Even if that did happen, we don't have an army. We don't have a military here in the UK. We've decimated it. Well, we don't have one. What are we going to do against Putin's army? Well,
that's right. I mean, we certainly don't have any kind of force that can be mobilised and sent in to fight on behalf of Ukraine, because Ukraine have already got plenty of people. I mean, yes, we're very good at sending in special forces, and it may well be that we already have some special forces in there, and it may well be that is our strength now. But what we certainly don't have is the mass numbers of people that would overwhelm the Russians. We simply haven't got that, and haven't had it for years.
Yeah, and I think the rhetoric, as you've noticed, and you've been talking about it, Mike, people talking about, where should the, no-fly zones and NATO should get involved more. I mean, look, if we did that, we're going to enter into a war that none of us want, on both sides. We don't really need that kind of rhetoric and that talk at the moment. And I know the UK government have pushed that to one side. I'm glad they have. But my question is this, Mike. What are the solutions? What are the answers? We've put sanctions in place, economic sanctions. We've done all we can on our side. Yes, they're after the oligarchs and they need to do a bit more. We mentioned Abramovich earlier. They need, apart from economic sanctions, what else can we do? And I'm afraid, because I was asking people this morning on social media, what are the solutions? And there was varied replies, and most people are like, they really don't know what the answers are, because it seems inevitable, like what's going to happen.
Well, I mean, I think the problem with social media as well, Richard, is that we now have an entire sort of army of people who think they're expert in foreign policy, who think they're expert in, army manoeuvres, and they think they're expert in winning wars, so it's always dangerous to start asking what they think we should be doing. In my day when we were running newspapers, we used to run newspapers the old-fashioned way, which was, we'll tell you what the news is, we'll tell you exactly what we should be doing, and we've got expert columnists who will tell you what you should be thinking. But now people are allowed to think for themselves. It doesn't work out so well for them.
No, you got John in Manchester who's turned into a military commander overnight. I mean, it's just amazing. It is just nuts.
And the numbers, and also I love the numbers of people who know exactly what Vladimir Putin's doing and exactly what he's going to do tomorrow and then the next day.
Yeah, well, look, I'm no expert on international policy or anything like that, right, or foreign policy, but I just say it as I see it. And I think at the moment we're in a very precarious situation where we don't really have the answer. The UK government are putting all these sanctions on this, squeezing them economically to try and, I suppose, cut off his wealth that's funding this war. But I mean, it's defeatist to admit that. I'm watching the president of Ukraine, and it seems to me as if this is going to go one way. I feel for the people of Ukraine. I feel for innocent women and children and men that have had to fight this war. That's not their war. Russians, certainly the people, media blackouts over there, they surely don't want this war because they've got relatives in Ukraine. There are no winners in war, Mike. Let's be honest. They're just casualties. And I think, it's interesting. We haven't heard much from Tony Blair, have we, the last few weeks?
He's gone very quiet. I wonder if he's under house arrest somewhere in the Middle East, because he's out there probably trying to spread his word of peace and love. And, he did manage to get himself a peace envoy's job in the Middle East. Not quite sure how that's going.
Yeah, and the other thing as well, Mike, I noticed on social media, I don't know if you've noticed this as well, people are kind of taking sides. I mean, I've been shocked at this.
I've been amazed at the number of people who don't think that this is actually real.
Yeah, well, this is why I got slated. I had a few days off Twitter because I was going to say something I regretted and get banned. But anyway, so I didn't. But the reality is people were attacking me because I was saying, if you deny there's a war going on in Ukraine, you are mental. Yeah. And you should see the replies. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You're watching fake news, mainstream media. And I'm like, no, I watch all kinds of news. I watch RT news. I watch, all kinds of news. Your depth and breadth is important when it comes to researching stuff. And it was amazing to see people that have been very supportive of some of the things I've said over the last few years, turn on me viciously, like really viciously.
Well, I said this to Sonia yesterday. We now live apparently in a world where you either trust what you're looking at or you don't. People seem to have lost the ability to make a judgment. You can quite happily look at something in a newspaper or on a television, which turns out not to be quite what it seems. But that doesn't mean everything they do is completely and utterly made up. And that's just simply not the world that we live in. There's no question, as I keep saying, there's one fact that you need to know in this scenario, and it is that Vladimir Putin and the Russian military have invaded Ukraine. That's the first fact you need. And once you get past that, then you can decide what else to do. I mean, for example, I think from our point of view, much more important really than how militarily it ends up is what we do with all these Ukrainian refugees who are coming over probably by the millions by the time we get to the end of this month.
Well, that's going to be the big humanitarian crisis is going to be massive. Post-wars always are, Mike. And I think there's close on 1 million people already crossed the border. And, places like Poland and Moldova, places like seen it here in Wales, actually. There's a number of places opened up where people can take food, clothes where they're going to send it off to Ukraine, to bordering countries like Poland and stuff. So that's going to be a massive problem. And then we look at our own problem here in the UK. We've got massive immigration, uncontrolled immigration still going on. There's still people coming into the Kent border, remember. Let's remind our viewers and listeners, Mike. And yet we, in the face of the situation now where people are generally fleeing horrific scenes there in Ukraine, and we've got to offer support and help. But how much support and help can a little island like United United Kingdom give? That's the issue, isn't it?
We could have given a lot more support and help had we not already taken in thousands and thousands and thousands of illegal migrants who supposedly, I mean, I'm quite happy to see that these people from Ukraine are coming here in their thousands and hundreds of thousands, because they are genuinely fleeing a war zone. That's what it looks like. You know, it doesn't look like a bunch of blokes sitting on a dinghy, you know,
taking
arriving
selfies.
and taking selfies and getting off with their new trainers onto the beaches of Dover and coming from Calais. We're going to go crossing over to Liz Truss, who's in Lithuania shortly, so bear with us, Richard, when we do have to jump over there. But, you know, if we hadn't taken all of these refugees in the first place, claiming asylum, we might be in a better position to offer the Ukrainians some temporary aid and temporary assistance. I'm not up for this, you know, let's all open up our houses and give you a spare bedroom to a Ukrainian family. I mean, that's ludicrous and ridiculous. If somebody wants to do it, that's fine, but we shouldn't be suggesting it, should we?
No, but Gary Lineker offered that, but he didn't actually do it, did he, if you remember?
Well, I mean, he's offered him a run round in his Mercedes C63 to see if he can save the planet while he's at it, but I'm not sure if that's something where you're going to take him up on.
I think what we should do is, send economic migrants, right? They shouldn't be here. Deport them and let's get real refugees and give them the love and support that they're desperately going to need from war-torn countries. Because let's be honest, mate, you and I know, many people know this, there are a lot of people coming over here illegally, economic migrants. They're using our system because the system's not working, it's not fit for purpose, because they know they can get the benefits, they know they can jump on the bandwagon, they know they can get all the rights that they get over here. And I think the government have a responsibility to look at the whole picture and say, hang on a minute, we've told them what they're doing is wrong. They just don't seem to get it. When they stood on a manifesto in 2019 says we're going to get tough on immigration, if anything, it's gone the other way, hasn't it?
Well, it has, yeah. I mean, they keep saying they're getting tough on immigration. We already know from January. I haven't seen the figures from February yet, but because they've now told us they're not going to give us the figures anymore, because that's their way of keeping it quiet. But in January, certainly, I think there was something like 7 times the number of people that came compared to the previous January. So there's no doubt in my mind that it's getting worse before it gets any better. And I don't even see how, given what Priti Patel's record has been like so far, how they are going to fix it.
I can't see it either, Mike, because, they've had plenty of time to do this since 2019. Yes, they can use the excuse, well, they have been used the excuse where we've been in the middle of a pandemic, there've been bigger issues to deal with. Yeah. And it seems all these things like smoke screens, aren't they? I'm picking this up across social media as well, and people I'm talking to, Mike, they're into politics, saying, well, this is happening, it's a distraction, that's a distraction. I mean, there's loads of distractions.
Yeah, they are. And Liz Truss is one of them. We've got to go there now.
The United Kingdom stands with our allies in doing all we can to support Ukraine against President Putin's war of choice. We must ensure Putin fails in this horrific enterprise and his ambitions go no further. We were pleased to support Lithuania's leadership, referring war crimes to the ICC. I'm here today in Vilnius with our Baltic friends because I want to say that the UK's commitment to the Baltics and to Article 5 are unyielding. Our Baltic friends know what's at stake, having long lived in the shadow of Russian aggression, and I admire your courage. We're working together to deliver 2 clear objectives. First, Putin must lose in Ukraine. We're helping Ukraine defend itself. Our defensive weapons from the United Kingdom are now being used to stop Russian tanks, but we need to do more. Secondly, we must contain this aggression. We are reinforcing NATO's eastern flank and supporting European security through the UK-led Joint Expeditionary Force. We are here in the Baltic region. We lead and have doubled our enhanced forward presence in Estonia. Our allies are leading troops across the Baltics. British military intelligence are working with Lithuania's military to enhance border defensive, including in the Suwałki Gap. 200 troops are doing joint military exercises right now, and we're working together on maritime security. At the NATO Foreign Ministers meeting tomorrow, we will be working together to strengthen our collective defence in the light of the changed security situation across Europe. In terms of supporting Ukraine with defensive weaponry, the United Kingdom was the first European country to give defensive military support to Ukraine, and we are now also supporting with the humanitarian aid. We've pledged 220 million in aid support to Ukraine, and we're the top European donor, and we will do more. We've also been at the forefront in tightening the vice on the Kremlin through sanctions, and it's vital at this juncture that we keep our foot on the gas. We've worked with the US, the EU and G7 to cut off funding for Putin's war machine, kicking Russian banks out of the financial system. We've also shut our airspace to Russian planes, and we're fast-forwarding sanctions against Russian oligarchs. But we need to go further. We need to make sure no Russian bank has access to SWIFT. And we need to go further on reducing dependency on hydrocarbons from Russia, including oil, gas and coal. We've also launched sanctions against Belarus for aiding and abetting aggression. I will be raising these issues at the G7 tomorrow and also at the European Union Foreign Affairs Council alongside the United States, Canada and Ukraine, who have also been invited in these extraordinary circumstances. This is a struggle not just for Ukraine's freedom and self-determination, but for all of our freedom and security. By continuing to respond with strength, we will together ensure that Putin loses. And we stand with our brave allies here in the Baltics to do just that.
Liz Truss there, the Foreign Secretary, talking to an audience in Lithuania, speaking about the G7 meeting coming tomorrow, talking about why we are so united against the Russian invasion. Russia's foreign minister has said just now Moscow is ready for talks to end the fighting in Ukraine, but will not stop targeting the embattled country's military infrastructure. We are talking, of course, right here to our good friend, Mr. Taylor. Richard, what do you make of what Liz Truss had to say there? I mean, it looks as though they're sort of hoping for the best, aren't they? That basically Russia gives up.
Yeah, it looks that way, doesn't it, by cutting him off by these sanctions. But also, his interesting opening remarks sounded very almost like they're preparing for the worst, because there is this fear that where will Putin stop once he's done this, and should Ukraine fall and surrender to him, will he continue into other European countries? And I think moving military troops, which he's mentioned, not into Ukraine, but on the borders of some of those countries, then clearly there is a concern. I don't know if you picked that up, Mike, in her opening remarks. It seems to be that they've had some security advice maybe, or information that they're privy to that the public aren't, that there are some real concerns. And I, for one, at the start, I remember saying, and again, I'm no expert on foreign policy, Mike, right? Just a Welshman that likes to rant, as you know.
Yeah.
But certainly,
well, listen, when you live in Wales, everything's foreign, isn't it? I mean, because everything has to be imported.
Yeah. Well, they literally, yeah. As we need to deport Mark Drakeford, that's another story, isn't it? Yeah. So I think, what the rhetoric that's happening now, we're preparing for the worst. I do fear for the people of Ukraine. This is my take. I might be wrong. I think Ukraine will fall. I think Vladimir will get his way. It will come at a huge cost to him, because post-war, what will happen to Russia, obviously still being sanctioned and cut off from the rest of the world. But let's not forget, Mike, too many countries have been energy dependent on places like Russia for far too long. And what we've done in these countries, we've pushed the big green agenda, which, by the way, reports come out saying now the cost of that net zero green agenda is so expensive, and they don't even know what the full cost is. So we've gone down this road. We've concentrated on being so woke and liberal in all the kind of stuff that we want to do, virtue signaling on climate change. We've forgotten what's going on in the real world, and we've been asleep at the wheel, I'm afraid, when it comes to Putin. And I fear that once Ukraine falls, he may possibly look to extend his power, because he wants to revive the old Russian Empire. That's his mission. He's from the old school, Mike, USSR. You know that. And he's in his last decade. He's in his 70s. He wants to leave a legacy, and I'm afraid that he won't stop just with Ukraine. Yeah. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think you have a very good point there, Richard. Listen, thanks very much indeed. We're going to see you next week in the studio, I think. Richard Taylor there reporting into us from Welsh Wales, as we like to call it here, the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. A fascinating country, a great country in many ways, run by a complete idiot. But there we are. What can you do?